Well, I'm queer myself, so I totally know.
Love it. I love it. So thank you everyone for joining us. We are actually jumping right in with Robyn and she is another lovely traditional Irish like myself with my McNamara name. And we're talking about resilience. And for me, I know that there are a bunch of memes going around Facebook that like resilient is not an option. It's something that you're like forced into, right? Like, so when people are like, you're so resilient, it's like, that's not a compliment. So, what, how do you feel about resilience? What do you think are I know that you talk about the three keys of resilience. Uh, how, why? Tell me all about it. I am committed to this discussion.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, for me, it was a really switching of a reframe in my mind of what resilience is because growing up, coming from a lot of trauma, it was just survival. And so, alcoholic, abusive dad, rageaholic, my mom suicidal. First time I was 4 years old when she tried to commit suicide, and very unstable home life. We left my dad and brother. We went to another province, Manitoba, where my Ukrainian side didn't speak any English. And then I lived with my cousins, and then eventually I went into foster care for a while and had a really wonderful connection with my other mom, as I called her, and finally got some stability in my life. And so even as a teenager or preteen, I was thinking, why do people do what they do? Like, why are some people aware and other people aren't? So I came into the world with that kind of frame of really wanting to understand why people did what they did and how could people be so mean to each other? Because somehow I tapped into that love quotient. And I remember thinking in my head, all songs are about love in some way, whether it's our dog in the country music or loving ourselves. And, I grew up in the time of the Beatles and loved them. And um, it was just so a different way of being. And so I did all the studying of psychology and all of those things, but it was all intellectual because my intellect had saved me. I learned to be quiet. I learned to do all these things for survival, but I wasn't really living my life. So resilience in that perspective looks like, yeah, you made it through. A lot of people would be dead by now, but you made it through. And then what happened? I went into a bad marriage, even though intellectually I knew, I didn't look for someone who drank, but the anger issue underneath was the same. And also, I'd squashed down my sexuality and didn't realize I finally came out after dealing with cancer. And I realized that that had been part of it, why I didn't connect with the men in my life for only for a short period of time. And then it was, moving on. It just didn't work. And my ex-husband actually said, you know what you want in a relationship, men can't give you. And it was like, whoa, when I thought about that later, well, what happened, I got breast cancer and, I've been doing everything for everyone else, working full time, union work on the side, strata council, and something had to give. And that was my health. And so that's why I really learned what is self first and learned a meditational system that I now teach. But it was really that first key is really connecting with ourselves and our emotions, because that was the first thing that opened up for me with the cancer, was to really let out all that fear, the anger, the sadness, I was so disconnected from myself in the heart.
Yes, and that's so important. Like one of the things that you said was, coming out later in life. For everyone watching, we're recording this during Pride Month. And so that makes my little homo heart happy. And for those of you who know, my followers know that I have PTSD from trauma and everything. And I always think it's interesting when people ask me like when I became non-binary, and I was like, after trauma stopped, you could actually accept who you were. And so I relate to that a lot, as you were like, oh no, you didn't accept the alphabet mafia until after, you had gotten out and away from that toxicness. And that's so relevant for people to understand, because a lot of people think that like you can be born, like we are born that way, but not everyone comes out holding a rainbow flag. Some of us
No.
figured it out a little bit later. Like I knew I was pansexual forever, but I didn't know I was non-binary until much later. And so it's trauma really can affect all aspects of our lives and how aware we are of ourselves. So I think resilience, a sad part of resilience is that we have to put parts of ourselves away to survive our trauma. And then once we're out of that trauma, we get to unpack them like little surprises. And so I love that that's something that we both discovered and that we have that in common. What else about the keys of resilience do you think is important for people to know as they're growing and transforming and feeling safe again?
Yeah, so that piece of, can I really be my own best friend, right? That piece of, can I have the courage to go inside? Because a lot of us feel that, it's too scary to go in there. And unfortunately, there's a lot of thinking out there that, oh, you just get through it, right? You do this one thing, you do some this, you do some that. And I've trained in so many modalities. And yes, the meditation, the energy healing, the tapping, all these different things help. But it's really about understanding who we are so that we can have that relationship with ourselves. And it's always conflict resolution that I trained in with ourselves. It's always inner child work. There's always very specific pieces because we did have to parcel out parts of ourselves to feel safe. And one of the things I do is also the Enneagram, where we actually do shadow work and have those discussions with those parts of ourselves so we can reintegrate them. But so often in society, right, it's all about what's out here and performance and that mask and looking good. And I went through that with the marriage, right? When things were bad, it's like I had to look extra good.
Mm-hmm.
So the suits, doing all the committee work, working out 2 hours a day, all of that, right?
Oh,
And
it has to be Instagrammable. That's what I tell people. Is if your self-care is Instagrammable, you've done it wrong. It should not be picture perfect. In all honesty, authentic self-care, authentic, like going in, like you said, shadow work, is so messy. It's not cute. It's not meant to be. If it is, it's not real. It's not real. It's so many people do that on social media. And I'm like, oh, that's so nice that your mask is still on. I hope that when you cry in a corner, you actually feel your feelings. A big one for me was I have three different things. One, I am my own biggest hype man. I will always like yell the most about myself. Like, I am awesome. I don't care if you think so. I think so. I will always love myself more than anyone else loves me, which sounds so weird, but that was one that I had to figure out because I grew up that like if other people love you, that's where your self-worth comes from. That's not a healthy thing to think ever. And then the third one is to date myself, just to get used to your own company. And like you said, when you're going within, it's like, are you comfortable sitting with every aspect of you, not just the Instagrammable you? So those are the ways that like I did it. But yeah, like the shadow work is messy. It's not, no, if it's Instagrammable, it's not real. Sorry, folks.
yeah, and that's part of the problem, right? Marketing is changing, thankfully, but people are really tired of these quick fixes and the spiritual bypass, right? Just be happy, everything will be cool, and, just manifest stuff. That doesn't work, And I met Marie Diamond, and she said, so much stuff was left out of the secret. There are those pieces, but again, it's like on the cutting room floor, all the kind of pieces within that aren't there. And same with the Enneagram, we see all these memes that get us more stuck in personality rather than going underneath that to say, what's going on for me? What are those reality strategies that I used growing up that may not be working for me anymore? And having that kindness and compassion
Mm-hmm.
to be able to be open to that and take it bits at a time. I really think we can do this in a gentle way and not have to bombard ourselves to figure it all out in the moment. And just really, we're kind to animals, we're kind to other people, and learning that kindness for ourselves can be really challenging. And that's why the third key to me is the conflict resolution, because I didn't know how to deal with that. I was very passive aggressive because it was too scary, right? If I spoke out, I could be killed, really. My
Yep.
dad actually pointed a gun at me. So it wasn't safe. And so I had to learn to deal with that conflict within so I could deal with other people and their conflict.
Absolutely. And on my healing journey, I don't know if you've experienced the same, but when you've had trauma like ours, it's such a colorful life. Um, People will always go like, "Oh, who are you without your trauma?" That's a big soundbite Instagrammable. And the problem is that if you have trauma that surrounds a lot of your upbringing and a lot of your life, you're no one without your trauma because it's integrated into how you breathe, the posture that you have, what you eat. Like regular human behavior is all surrounded by trauma. And I was challenged once by a therapist years ago, and they said, "Who are you despite your trauma? Who are you because of your trauma? Look at your entire life, and whatever you like about it, keep. Even if it had to do with trauma, keep it." I was raised incredibly traditional that women had a place, and so I know how to cook and bake and clean very, very well. I like all those things, even though I was raised in a very toxic way around them. That like that's the place of a feminine presenting person. But once I stopped thinking about it, like, oh, but that's trauma, that's woman's work. I was like, you know what? I really like making muffins. It brings joy. So there's this misconception that people put out there that it's like, take away your trauma and then this is the real you. And I always want to challenge people and be like, what do you like about yourself? I don't care if it was brought up in a toxic way. Like, what you gonna do with it now? Like, you can do anything you want with baking. I'll watch the Great British Bake Show as if it's the Olympics. I get so into it. And I would not appreciate it if I didn't have the past that I have. And I am perfectly fine with that. I'm never going to be a quintessential woman, but it does that make sense? Like, do you feel that with a life that's kind of steeped in trauma, like a childhood, that you get to take it and make what you want from it later? You don't have to take out all the trauma and be like, well, this is what I'm left with. It's like you get to take any part of your life and make it amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that place of we kind of go through a process because, first of all, it's kind of like this badge of honor, right? Where we identify with the trauma and it's like, look at me, I made it through. And it was the same with dealing with cancer. It was like, survivor, all this stuff. And one of the women that I knew, I really liked, she called it being a graduate of cancer.
Mm.
So and that can be the same for our trauma, right? We graduated from it. We're now moving into a new part of our life where that was part of who we are. And it's not like it's ever going to change, but we can now place it. We can see it for what it is. And we can say, what did I learn from that? And part of that is integrating that feminine, masculine part of us. And in the Enneagram, we talk about the law of three. So being able to hold masculine, feminine, knowing, not knowing, being, doing, whatever it is for you in the moment, and what transpires out of that when we can hold these two disparate things. And that's what you're talking about, is that different way of being that transforms, that's no longer binary. And that's what has got us stuck in this black and white thinking, in this way of these absolutes, because then we swing, right? We see this in politics, we see it in all parts of our lives. So I'm this way, then I'm that way. And then we need to find that kind of, I call it harmony. I don't call it balance. There's no such thing as balance, right? Balance is always moving,
Yeah.
but harmony is a flow where I can use the parts I want, tap into that, not make myself wrong for liking that.
Mhm.
And, and we see this even in the queer world where when I did a coming out group, it was those who were bisexual were still being stigmatized.
Yes. Yes. Bi, pan, ace. I was on a panel for gender expansion recently at an event, and there was an asexual person, and they raised their hand and they're like, "How do you feel about erasure within our own community?" And I was like, "Let me tell you something." And I got real into it. And all the other panelists are looking at me like, "Could you not like be so passionate about this?" And I'm like, we already have a hard enough time. Can we not have infighting? Like, can we be grown-ups about it? So no, it's so real. It is. I love the word graduate, by the way. I'm gonna be borrowing that. I'm shamelessly putting that in my toolbox. Because when I was younger, people were like, oh, you're a victim of abuse, you're a victim of trauma, you're a victim. And I adopted that victim mentality because everyone told me I was a victim. And then I shifted into like survivor, where it's like, yep, I have survived this and I'm strong and I am proud and I am, but that also came. Do you know what the pain Olympics are? Do you know that theory? It's where people measure their trauma and their pain. It's like, well, you think you had it bad. Here's what I went through. And obviously I am more resilient than you because I had this. And I feel like that's where survivor is. Like, you're still doing the pain Olympics. You're still living in a very defensive mindset. You've moved out of victimhood. But then once you graduate, once you're a graduate of abuse and trauma and hardship, you no longer see a point in the pain Olympics in comparing, in trying to one up people, in erasing someone else's identity or trauma or life experience because it looks different than yours. It's it's weird. Like, in talking to you, it's everything's harmony, everything's moving, but it's also leveling up. Like, it's every time you take another step forward, you're stepping up for yourself. That's what I feel like you really do for people. It's like every step forward, you're stepping up more for yourself, is how you do it. And you use it through those three keys. And I love that the last one is like conflict resolution. Like, it, because no one talks about it. No one talks about the fact that we fight with ourselves. I I'm a right bitch to myself. I'll admit it. When that hobgoblin starts talking, when my ego goes, "You suck. Everyone hates you," laughing at you when you walk out of the room. Then I'm like, "Ooh." But that's where you have to be your own biggest hype man. You have to be your own, like, love yourself, and then the hobgoblin will shut the fuck up.
Yeah, and I call that the inner critic, right? Those different messages. And just by having that awareness, because it all starts with awareness. So, what are those messages? What is it pointing to? And I hadn't heard the term the Pain Olympics, but I definitely agree, right? Because we're brought up to compare ourselves. And so it can also shut us down and say, well, my trauma wasn't as bad as yours. So, what do I have to complain about? So, it just becomes more shadow rather than being able to say, yeah, I had it too. We all do to
Yeah.
some degree,
Mhm.
but it's like, it's not helpful to compare, right? And I know the first time I went to a group on sexual abuse, like there was some really extreme stuff, and it was like, how do I have the right to talk about my life? I mean, it was bad, but and so I had to get over that. And there can be survivor's guilt, whether it's the trauma. um, I saw it with the cancer as well. I'd gone to this beautiful retreat, and a lot of the women were near death. There was 8 of us. It was amazing. Like, we were just so deep. We were brought through this beautiful process and could just be ourselves and talk about our death. And 2 of us are alive today. And so there was that process I had to go through with that. So to me, the biggest thing that I learned with the conflict resolution is kind of my mantra. It's like, all behavior makes sense, at least to that person, which includes me. So why, and that curiosity. So really bringing in that curiosity for ourselves, whether it's ourselves or others. And yeah, what am I reacting to? What are those parts of me that feel unsafe, unheard, unseen? Because these are human things that we need, but we dismiss them. We don't think they're important because we didn't get them. but we're all unique, but we all have the same needs.
Yeah. And I love gentle curiosity. I think it's amazing to just be like, huh, I wonder where that came from, or what can I do with this? And as far as meeting needs, I actually had this conversation recently with my mom. And to be clear, your healing is you. It needs to be about you. It's not other people healing you. And it is incredibly convenient to have any kind of support you can muster, professional and paid or non. So if you got support, love it up. And I had explained to my mom, I'm like, when I'm having a PTSD trigger that's severe enough that I like start to spiral and get like really emotionally dysregulated, instead of being like, well, why are you doing that? And that's embarrassing and everything. It's being like, what need, I said, ask me what need isn't being met. And most of the time I'll know. It won't be like I have no clue, though sometimes it is. It's like, I need a hug. Like I'm not getting physical reassurance. And then I'll get a hug and then be fine. Or I need validation, or I need, so it's this gentle curiosity with yourself, but then also to incorporate, when you're ready, other people into it, that if they see you and they love you and they support you and they understand, they'll be like, what do you need actually? Like, do you need a hug? Do you need a nap? What is it? What is it that you need? And I love that. I love that that's a thing.
Yeah, and some people don't know because they've been doing everything for everyone else. So having that curiosity to check out a couple of different things, and for those of us who live alone, it's like getting that need met. Like I used to have car accidents. And when I started in the training, and I've been teaching this modality for over 20 years now, it was I got to see I needed that touch. So making sure I have monthly massage therapy or whatever it is, so that touch is there. And then that little one inside can calm down and say, oh, we have that connection.
Yes, I love that. So thank you so much for joining us and wanting to be a part of this discussion about resilience and how to help people who have unique and colorful lives like us. If one of the listeners, if one of the followers wanted to get a hold of you, is there a way that they can contact you if they have questions, want to become a client, anything like that? Please let us know.
The website is a lifeofchoice.ca because I'm in Canada. And the email is Robyn, ROBYN, at a lifeofchoice.ca. And I'm on Facebook with a personal and business profile, and LinkedIn. You can find me in most of the media.
I love it. Perfect. And thank you for explaining what CA meant, because I've seen it a few times and I'm like, is that a corporation? I don't know what that means. It means Canada. Good to know. Good to know. I now know. You have taught me something very important, because I was so confused by that. So thank you everyone for tuning in to this beautiful episode about resilience with Robyn M. And if you would like to see more, subscribe, like, follow. If you have questions, comment. We are very conversational people. We want you to ask questions. We want to help you wherever you need it. Go forth, be the hero of your own story, and don't forget to be offensively authentic.